Please stand by. Good day and welcome to the Asian American Justice Center's Asian Nevada Political Poll Conference Call. Today's call is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Mr. Toby Chattery. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi, thanks for joining our call today. We're going to hear from several community leaders who are going to be urging candidates in Nevada to address issues that are important to the fastest growing racial group in Nevada, which is the Asian American population there. And we're also going to hear from pollster David Merriman, who is going to talk about the results of a poll, specifically around the Nevada results of a poll of Asian American voters. We'll also hear about how Asian American voters are being mobilized to vote in Nevada. We will hear from 3 or 4 speakers today. First up will be Christine Chen, who's the Executive Director of APIA Vote. We'll hear from Gloria Keoli, who's the Political Director of Apala, Nevada. We'll also hear from pollster David Merman, who's a partner at Lake Research Partners, and we should also be hearing from Min Luo, who's the President and Executive Director of the Asian American Justice Center. I want to tell folks that if you have any questions at any time, you can press *1 on your number pad. You can do that during the brief statements that we hear from our opening speakers. I highly encourage it so we can go right into question and answer right after our brief statements. So with that, let's start with Christine Chen. Christine?
Thank you, Toby. Hi, everyone. Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote is a national nonpartisan organization that essentially works with partners to mobilize Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the electoral and civic participation at the national, state, and local levels. We're essentially focused on developing new capacity to do this work with each of our local partners, and the focus is really mobilizing the grassroots community. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders continue to be an important and growing political constituency. Since 2008, 600,000 new Asian American voters entered the electorate at that time, and we're anticipating that will actually grow even further this round. Since Asian American Pacific Islander voters are the nation's fastest growing racial group and are expected to vote in record numbers this fall, our voters will support candidates who best engage Asian Americans, a demographic with increasing political clout. And an overwhelming majority of Asian American survey, nearly 5 out of 6, said they will vote this November, and half of them are more enthusiastic than ever to vote, a trend that has continued from the last few presidential elections. At the same time, we also recognize there are still various barriers that we need to address. Racial and ethnic barriers and immigration laws have historically prevented a large majority of Asians from becoming naturalized U.S. citizens and engaging in this democratic process. But in the last 60 years, we have seen positive changes, and the data supports the fact that Asian American and Pacific Islander communities are ready to exercise their right to vote. For example, the citizenship rate of naturalization of 58% is the highest of any major racial ethnic group. With 2/3 of our community being first-generation immigrants, there will be many first-time voters. And so our role with our community partners are to eliminate barriers, to get volunteers out that can actually work with limited English proficient communities, translate materials, and we've continued to actually conduct trainings and technical assistance with nonprofit organizations and volunteers, especially as the state regulations around voter registration and voter ID continues to change. In addition, API Vote is also committed to working with our youth partners to also specifically focus on young voters. So with that particular time, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Gloria Keoli, who is one of our community partners, who is actually with the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. With that, she will actually talk about what is actually happening in Nevada, because as we see, AAPI population in Nevada has continued to grow with an increase of over 116%. And one of the things that we also want to know before I hand it off to her is that with a new congressional district as a result of reapportionment and key House seats and state legislative races on the ballot, AAPI voters should garner significant attention from candidates seeking or courting the AAPI community. For instance, the AAPI population of 9% or more are present in 8 state House districts. And Nevada is ground zero for the housing crisis, and AAPIs have a 12% unemployment rate, the highest in the country. So with that, there's actually a lot of work that needs to be done by the political campaigns to actually engage in our community and to actually win the support. With that, I would like to hand it over to Gloria.
Thanks, Christine. I'm Gloria Kawili, and I serve as the APALA State Director, Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. We have been in Nevada for over 10 years, really nurturing and motivating, mobilizing, and making sure our community, the Asian Pacific American community, participates in this electoral process. Our biggest hurdle is really indifference, apathy. Our folks feel that it is not that important to them because it does not affect them personally. We have, I believe, changed that mindset in the sense that we have held several town hall meetings. We have done a lot of phone banking. We have done a lot of door knocking through the years, and we have addressed the importance of their citizenship. Citizenship is no longer a benefit that is free. It comes with obligations that needs one to engage, so that our public benefits become a reality. New citizens are very, very critical in this election. We also have engaged our youth components, and they have become very, very active. Now, the importance of this is that it translates into them being our tools, really, to get the folks at home, the grandmas, the uncles, the fathers, the parents, the aunts, the uncles, to understand the importance of voting. Our numbers are huge. This year, because of that, it has required Clark County to translate. As a matter of fact, the Filipino-American community is the largest Asian Pacific American group, and it has engaged tremendously. As we speak on this phone right now, there is a big voter mobilization, a registration program going on in Seafood City, which is a large complex where Filipino Americans, and others go for their shopping needs, they eat there, the restaurants. So that goes on a continuous level. Our outreach to Asian Pacific American Islanders is a four-pronged. We do the voter registration, voter mobilization, voter education, and then, of course, voter protection. We don't make it complicated. We make it important for them to understand that their numbers are the ones that will make the difference in Nevada. I've been around a long time here, and I'm still bold to say that the complexity of Nevada has changed, and I dare say that Nevada has become the new Iowa. And with that, I turn it over to the next speaker, and we'll open for questions. I believe it's David.
We'll first hear from Mi Mua, and then we'll hear David's presentation. So Mi, you can go ahead now. Then.
Thank you, Toby, and thank you all for joining the call. I apologize. I had a little bit of technical difficulty. The other thing I want to warn all of you is that I have been doing a lot of work the last couple of days speaking and been training, and so I'm losing my voice. But I will try my best, and if you can't hear me, just tell me to try to speak a little bit more clearly. Again, my name is Mi Moore. I'm the president and executive director of the Asian American Justice Center. We're a member of the Asian American Center for Advancing Justice. We're very, very proud and excited to be a partner and co-author of this survey project with the AJI Vote and the Asian American Institute in Chicago. AJC has a long history in working to protect the rights and interests of Asian American voters. We work closely with our affiliates, the United States Department of Justice, national civil rights partners, community partners, and key stakeholders on a number of initiatives, including Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act, which requires jurisdictions to provide bilingual voting assistance to registered voters. In this area, AAJC has worked for years to ensure the API community knows their right to vote and understands the laws that directly affect their communities. AAJC has also conducted workshops that focus on how community members can work with election officials to make sure their language assistance is effective and accessible to the API community. Another area that we've done a lot of work on is in the Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act to ensure that voters get the assistance they need from the person of their choice in order to cast a ballot. Section 208 protects those voters who need assistance in several categories, including blindness, disability, or the inability to read or write. In this election cycle, AAJC is launching a voter education campaign to ensure that Asian American voters know their rights. We also engage in voter protection efforts to ensure that the Asian American vote is not suppressed. AAJC, in partnership with its coalition partners, operate a nationwide voter protection hotline. Our attorneys have done poll monitoring to ensure the rights of Asian Americans are protected. For the 2010 census, we engaged in redistricting work where we partnered with the NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, and MALDAF on a national redistricting handbook. We have also worked with local community-based organizations to ensure fair redistricting. For election purposes, we also engage in exit polling. AAJC and our affiliates have done exit polling in different states across the country to determine if the needs of Asian American voters are met at the polls. And finally, in the courts, where AAJC has filed briefs before the United States Supreme Court on every major case that impacts the protection of Asian Americans in their ability to have their vote count. This new survey is a major component of our overall work and is particularly important and timely in understanding the Asian American electorate. As a Hmong American and as a former elected official, I fully understand the influence the Asian American community has in the electorate today and their potential to change the political landscape of this nation. I also know from practice and experience that political leaders who embed a strategy to engage the Asian American communities as a part of their core strategy will be rewarded by a margin of victory, and those who ignore us do so at their own peril. This survey brings to light and to the mainstream electorate the knowledge that many in our community have known for a long, long time. Asian Americans, as Christine has shared, are the fastest-growing minority group in the United States. It is also widely known that there are high Asian American populations in states like California, New York, and Hawaii, but the untapped secret is the Asian American population that is growing with approximately two-thirds of the states, 36 of the states, showing growth rates well over 50% since the last census. Yet there is still a lack of outreach from our political leaders and candidates. In the last 2 years, only 23% of the AAPIs were contacted by the Democratic Party, and only 17% of AAPIs were contacted by the Republican Party. Not only are the parties and party leaders not paying attention to those of us who are already in their base, but they're not even fighting for those of us who are independent and waiting to be wooed. The current polls show that our next president will likely be determined by the slimmest margin. The leadership in Congress is also up for grabs. And as we head into this critical election, I call upon our leaders and future leaders to take note of the AAPI community. For this untapped community to make the difference, for a candidate who wants to head to Washington, or a party who wants to lead our nation in the White House or Congress. Thank you. And now I turn it over to our researcher from the Lake Research Group.
Great. This is David Merman at Lake Research Partners, national public opinion research and strategy firm, and reporting data here from a national survey we did of Asian American and Pacific Islander voters, registered voters, nationwide, and then we did some oversamples in certain states that allowed us to break those states out and look at them, and Nevada is one of those states, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. I also want to acknowledge my partner, Celinda Lake, and Associate Shilpa Grover, who helped to design and analyze the research. In the interest of time, for those of you following online, we're going to skip through some slides that we can send the entire presentation out to those who want to see it, but we have some slides of summary and text summary and a methodology and some demographics from the survey, which I'm happy to address. But let's get straight to the findings and the key data here. So if we skip ahead to slide 6, we measured both some demographics and some facts about these voters' families and their own situation, and also some of their attitudes toward politics, political leaders, and the political process. So on slide 6, we start with just their likelihood to vote. Keeping in mind these are all registered voters, so these are people who are able to vote, and in most cases here they intend to vote. 79% here in Nevada say they are almost certain to vote in the election. That's actually a little bit under the percentage we got nationally, but it's still a high level of interest in the election. 15% probably, and just a handful saying they're not sure that they will vote. On slide 7, we see some of the demographics of the Asian American population, voter population in Nevada. Notably, a majority of these voters were born in another country. They are immigrants. Now, that's actually a lower percentage than of all Asian Americans nationwide, but still 53% in Nevada are immigrants, and then the remainder, 46%, were born in the U.S. Many of those who are immigrants did immigrate as children, so they have grown up, obviously, as Americans. And if we turn to the next slide, we see on slide 8 that even among that large portion that was born in the U.S., still 65% of those have a parent who was born in another country, so they are second-generation immigrants. So the immigrant experience is still very important and central to the families of these voters, even though many of them themselves were born and raised in the United States. In terms of where they get information, on slide 9, we see that the vast majority of Asian Americans in Nevada get their news on politics and issues from television. That's both national and local television, but obviously a very important news source for these voters. Followed by the internet and social media, a growing source of information, 43%, and 34% saying newspapers, an important source for them. All of those quite a bit higher than things like radio, community organizations, and other sources of information. So it's important to reach out to these voters and through those media, obviously, for those who want to connect with them in terms of politics. We also note, though, within that media consumption on slide 10, that a substantial portion, about 3 out of 10 of these voters in Nevada, get some of their news in a non-English language. Now, a lot of them, 25%, get a mix of English and non-English media. Just 4% in Nevada, again, that's lower than some other states, get their media exclusively from non-English media, but still up to it's 30% here, 29% who are getting some of that information in other languages. And then the majority, 71%, getting it in English. So you have to cover the spectrum to reach this community, both in English and in these other languages. Notably, even though most are getting their news in English, we do have a majority of these voters speaking another language at home. We don't have the graph here, but about 2/3 of these voters in Nevada speak another language other than English at home, and that includes Korean, Mandarin, Tagalog, Cantonese, Vietnamese, all substantial language minorities in this population in Nevada. Turning to the attitudes and some of their feelings about this election and where we're headed as a country, you go to slide 12, you see that the Asian American voters in Nevada actually have a net negative view of how things are going in the country by 7 points, 47% wrong track, 40% right direction. That is a little bit more pessimistic than Asian Americans nationally. It is a little bit more optimistic than other voters nationally. So a little bit more positive Asians are generally, but a little bit more negative here in Nevada. Interestingly, though, they're quite a bit more positive on the direction of the country for people like you. 56% of the voters think things are going well for people like themselves, so better than the country as a whole, which is interesting given the difficulties of the economy in Nevada. About the economy nationally, Asian American voters are quite fairly lukewarm or negative about that. On slide 18, we see 40% think the economy is just fair, 30% think it's poor, only 19% think it's good or excellent. So certainly feeling the struggle still and feeling like the economy needs to improve. Having said that, President Obama has mixed views of his job performance among Asian Americans, but really considering the economy better than you might expect. So on slide 14, we have 50% of the Asian American voters in the state giving President Obama a good or excellent rating, and an equal 50% giving it a just fair or poor rating, 30% just fair, 20% poor. So again, this is more negative on the president than Asian Americans nationally, but still mixed and equal numbers of positive and negative views of his job performance. As everywhere, as with all voters, the job performance numbers are not as good for him as his personal favorability. That is stronger. And we see that on the next slide, on slide 16, skipping the title slide. We see on 16 that personal favorability for President Obama is quite strong in this community. 68% favorable, 26 unfavorable. This is in Nevada. So even though there's, concerns about the economy, concerns about the direction of the country, some concerns about the president's job performance, they still like him pretty strongly here, quite a bit better than Mitt Romney, where his favorability is only 27 favorable, 48 unfavorable, so net negative for him. And notably, this was several weeks ago now, but still Mitt Romney at 26% without an impression of him. So he was not that well defined to these voters, and still room to, for both sides, both the Republicans and Democrats, to tell these voters more about Mitt Romney, whether they want to support him or not. Notably also, similar to the presidential candidates, but not quite as intensely, these voters are positive for the Democratic Party, 58 to 25, and net negative toward the Republican Party, 25 to 56. But again, still, a lot of those feelings are just mildly positive or unfavorable, and so there's room for both parties to do more outreach to these voters. When we turn to the actual presidential ballot, we do see a substantial lead for Obama here in Nevada with the Asian American voters, 54 to 29 over Romney. That's a pretty good margin. It is, however, quite a bit narrower than the overall margin we're seeing nationally, where it's closer to over a 40-point margin right now among Asian Americans for Obama over Romney. Here in Nevada, a little closer, a little bit more Republican support, but nonetheless, it is a net win for President Obama if the election were held today. You also see 16% undecided, so still some room for movement, and either Romney could make it close here with Asian Americans, or Obama could expand that lead substantially. And reflecting on the previous vote, it's interesting in this state that we see a little bit of a decline in Obama's support from where people said they were voting in 2008. 63% said they supported him then. So again, suggesting there's some play in these voters and some room for both parties to reach out to them, but also room for Obama to grow and possibly reach over 60% again with this community. The congressional ballot, and it was mentioned earlier, of course, the important Senate race, the House races in this state that are going to be critical. We do see a lot more undecided in this community at the congressional level. Still a big advantage for Democrats at 45 to 23, but 32% undecided, a third of these voters not sure who they will vote for, and clearly showing that they're not automatically voting a street party ticket all the way down. They're going to be listening and trying to figure out which of these candidates gets their concerns and is speaking to their community. We do see, though, the roots. We wanted to understand sort of where these advantages came from, where the perceptions of these two parties within this community. So we asked on a whole range of issues which party the voters preferred. And when we look at Asian Americans in Nevada, we see substantial advantages for the Democrats, particularly in sort of fairness type issues, standing up for the middle class, education, and health care, those kind of socioeconomic issues about just the necessities for your family. People overwhelmingly preferring the Democratic Party over the Republican. A solid majority of the Democratic Party is better on those issues. It gets a little softer when we turn to things like sharing your values and jobs in the economy, where, as we saw, there was some concern about the economy, and we do have an advantage for the Democrats, 53-21. They're going to be heard first, probably have the first chance to reach these voters on the economy, but clearly a lot of voters holding back, and over a quarter here, not sure which party is better on jobs and the economy, so some room, again, for both of them to communicate. Then on the next slide, slide 21, we see some other issues where there is still an advantage for Democrats, but it is not as wide. So on things like education, healthcare, we saw wide advantages. In areas of taxes, national security in particular, the budget deficit, narrow advantages for Democrats, but obviously some interest in the Republican views on those issues as well. Some advantage for Democrats in foreign policy, and a substantial advantage in immigration, 42 to 21. But again, that is a narrower advantage in this state than we see elsewhere around the country, where Asian Americans tend to prefer the Democrats in immigration by a wider margin than that. So finally, on engaging Asian Americans in politics and in this election, if you turn to slide 23, we see that, as was meant, the national numbers were given earlier as to the low level of outreach that these voters have experienced from the two parties. Here in Nevada, there's a little bit higher, but just barely. We still have a substantial number. When you add up not at all and only a little, 69% of these voters say they have not heard from the Democratic Party in the past 2 years in any meaningful way. Just 28% have heard some or a great deal. And on the Republican side, it's even weaker. Only 18% have heard some or a great deal from the Republican Party in the last few years. So the vast majority, 80% of the Asian American voters have not heard anything substantial from the Republican Party. So a wide gap here, a lot of room for both parties to reach out and connect with these voters more effectively. In spite of that, in spite of not having heard much from the parties, we do see some enthusiasm in this community. On slide 24, 52% are saying they are more enthusiastic to vote this year than in previous elections, 22% less enthusiastic. So suggesting it could be high turnout, a lot of interest in this community, wanting to vote, but clearly needing more information about some of the candidates and issues. And then, importantly, in terms of helping these voters to participate, we do see in Nevada a substantial number, 16%, saying that they would be more likely to vote if they could get some assistance in language. And again, that's actually a lower level than we see in some states, but still an important proportion of these voters. It would be helpful if they could get that assistance in voting. And then one just simulation we did just to see what the possible impact is, and this is, based on projecting some data that we got in this survey. But you do see, if we look at the advantage on the presidential ballot that we currently have in Nevada, 54 to 29 for Obama, if you project that out to the size of the population and the likely turnout among Asian American voters, we could see, and this is just based on 2008, of course there's been substantial growth, but even based on 2008 turnout, if we had this advantage, that would be a 9,000 vote advantage for Obama. That could be enough to swing a state like Nevada, which of course is closely contested. If the turnout grows, that could get even wider, or it could narrow if the Republicans are more effective at speaking to these voters. So a lot of potential here for this to be an important population in the election this November. So let me stop, and I will turn it back to Toby.
Great. So at this point, we'll have time for some questions. So just press *1 on your number pad if you'd like to get into the question queue, and we can dive deep into it at that point. Don't be shy. Just press *1 on your number pad. I know there are a lot of reporters on the call, and I think we'll probably take this first question from the Las Vegas Sun. Christina, do you want to go for it?
Yes. This is more of a technical question. This is to David Merman. We were wondering, could we use the graphs in the PowerPoint and source it to Lake Research Partners?
From our point of view, it's fine to do that. And, with this release, obviously, we're now sharing these findings with everyone. So it's not a problem. But do please credit to Lake Research Partners on the research.
All right. Thank you.
Terrific. And let us know if you need anything else. Okay, Christina. Thank you. Other questions? *1 on your number pad. PBS NewsHour. Beth, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you broke down any of the polling by subgroups of Asian Americans. Like, did you look at specifically Korean Americans versus Chinese Americans, et cetera, et cetera?
In Nevada, we did not because the sample small. In order to have enough to even report these data, we have to merge them together. For the national data, of course, which was a part of a national study, we did break down the 6 largest Asian American voter groups. So we do have numbers for Indian Americans, Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipino, and so on, and that's reported separately in our national data. There were some variations, of course, among those communities, although there were also some similarities in terms of their, how they view the issues, how they view the parties, and the substantial number of, undecided voters who are not being represented by the parties.
Okay, thanks.
And Beth, I'll send you a link to where some of those constituency-specific, at least at the national level, data is online.
Okay,
so
great. That'd be wonderful.
And back to Gloria, I believe I might see you in an hour or so. I have specific numbers for our Asian Pacific American groups.
Okay, you're meeting with another Beth Summers.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm in D.C.
Okay. All right.
But yeah,
all right.
I'm sure she'll be interested in that. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Okay, we'll take the next question from the Korean Journal. Chelsea?
Hi. So I was wondering, Asian American voters are often characterized as being very conservative, but your results are showing that they're much more moderate and even in Nevada left-leaning. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk about why that is, or what may lead, why that might be.
Sure. Well, I think one thing that tends to happen in coverage of these communities is there tends to be a conflation of conservative in the personal sense, people, who believe in, strong families and sort of a sober way of living, with conservative in the political sense. And sometimes when you ask people themselves whether they're liberal or conservative, you get that kind of an answer. So it doesn't always map actually to political attitudes correctly. When you ask, though, about the political parties and the differences between the parties, we see here, though, a fairly well-developed view among Asian American voters, not just in Nevada. This pattern was across the country, where they really do believe the Democrats are more in tune with them on some key issues, things like education, health care, being on your side, treating all Americans fairly, and immigration, although that was a little lower here. And so that suggests, yes, in the American political spectrum, that by and large these are moderate to liberal voters, even if they wouldn't necessarily describe themselves as liberals, if you asked a direct ideology question. But it also speaks to the need for, again, both parties to reach out to these voters more effectively on these issues, because there is room for both of them to make their case if they're willing to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Great, and we have time for really one more question. We'll take that from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Laura?
Yeah, thanks for having this call. I just want to make sure I understand the numbers. If I read this right, President Obama won Asian Americans here by 63% in 2008. McCain got 19%. And according to this poll, 54% support Obama and 29% support Romney. So does that mean that Obama has fallen by 9 points and the Republican is up by 10? You know what I mean? Is there a shift in views?
It does, and keep in mind these are both self-reported, so they're telling us who they voted for. These same voters are telling us who they voted for 4 years ago, and sometimes there is a little winner bias in that. But yes, it does appear that you clearly have some, about 9% who say, well, I voted for Obama last time, but I'm not necessarily voting for him this time. And you do have a little bit of higher percentage saying I'm at least leaning to Romney as compared to those who voted for McCain. So that does suggest, a little bit of movement in the Republican direction and some opportunity for Romney to grow his vote here. Having said that, on balance, it is still a Democratic vote and still a net plus for Obama to the extent that more Asian Americans are participating in the state, because he still has a pretty big margin here.
Okay, that's terrific. Thanks.
Great. That is all the time that we have right now. I know that there are other people in the queue and who may have questions, so please be in touch with either myself or Leonie. This is Toby. And we will obviously follow up as soon as possible. With that, thanks for joining today's call. We have copies of the presentation if folks would like a PowerPoint version. But other than that, we'll be in touch. Thank you.
That concludes today's presentation. Thank you for your participation.